Medics aren't supposed to be brave. We're supposed to be stupid. That's what Lieutenant Carver told me after they pulled me off that field outside Cisterna. Said no sane man crawls toward gunfire when every third man he's reaching is already cold. But January 30th, 1944, sanity wasn't currency. The 3rd Ranger Battalion had been annihilated that morning, nearly 700 men swallowed by German positions we didn't know existed. By noon, our rifle company was exposed, taking enfilade fire from stone houses we couldn't identify, wounded scattered like dropped coins across plowed earth. Here's what they don't tell you about battlefield medicine. The morphine syrettes work, the bandages hold, but the real injury is having to choose. Who gets the tourniquet? Who gets the prayer? Who gets left until the shooting stops? If it ever does. My name's James Hartnett. Everyone called me Jimmy back in Philadelphia, where I worked as an orderly at Pennsylvania Hospital. 23 years old when they shipped me to Italy with the 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division. I'd completed combat medical training, but I'd only been in the line 3 weeks when Cisterna happened. 3 weeks. Barely enough time to learn which boys snored, which ones wrote letters home every night, which ones went quiet before battle. The thing about Anzio, that's the beachhead where all this took place, was supposed to be our knockout punch. January 1944, we'd been stuck at the Gustav Line for months, beating our heads against German fortifications at Cassino. So command decides we'll do an amphibious end run, land at Anzio, cut behind German lines, march straight to Rome. Easy, except nothing in war is easy. We landed January 22nd, and instead of pushing inland, we dug in, waited. And while we waited, the Germans brought up everything they had. Artillery in the Alban Hills with perfect observation of every move we made. They could see us scratch ourselves. By late January, we were pinned on this narrow strip of beach, 30 miles of coastline, getting pounded day and night. And command, they're desperate for something, anything to break the stalemate. So they order the Rangers, 1st and 3rd Battalions, the best we had, to capture this town called Cisterna di Littoria, rail hub about 6 miles inland. Intelligence said light resistance, maybe a couple German companies holding the town. They were wrong, catastrophically wrong. We moved out before dawn on the 30th. Company E tasked with supporting the Ranger assault on their right flank. I remember the darkness, how cold it was. Maybe 35 degrees, and the ground was frozen on top but soupy underneath. So men kept slipping in these irrigation ditches we were using for cover. My aid bag weighed 22 pounds. Canvas sack with morphine syrettes, sulfa powder, bandages, tourniquets, tags for marking the dead. I also carried an M1 carbine I'd never fired at a person and hoped I'd never have to. The boys were quiet that morning. Kowalski from Pittsburgh kept whispering about his girl back home, showed everyone her picture for the 100th time. Corporal Dietz talked about his daughter Clara, 7 years old, how she'd be starting 2nd grade when he got home. Sergeant Hawkins, he was regular Army, survived North Africa, didn't say much at all. Just cleaned his rifle and stared at the darkness like he could see through it. Around 5:30, we dug into a shallow irrigation ditch on the edge of this massive turnip field. Farmhouses maybe 400 yards northwest, stone buildings with tile roofs. Lieutenant Carver briefed us. We hold this line, provide covering fire for the Ranger assault, secure their flank. Simple. The Rangers would hit Cisterna straight on. We'd make sure nobody rolled them up from the south. By afternoon, we'd have hot chow in town. That's what we told ourselves. Dawn came slow and gray. We could hear the Rangers moving up ahead, couldn't see them, but heard scattered gunfire building into something heavier, artillery rumbling in the distance. Then around 8:15, everything changed. Private Kowalski was in the middle of complaining about frozen K rations, something about how even the ham and eggs tasted like cardboard, when a rifle crack split the morning and his jaw just disappeared, just gone. 1 second, there was a face. Next, there was this wet red mess and sounds no human should make. I moved without thinking, rushing forward while everyone else pressed into the frozen mud. Kowalski was on his back, drowning in his own blood, eyes wide and panicked, trying to breathe through a throat full of tissue and bone fragments. I tried to clear his airway, attempted an emergency tracheotomy with shaking hands, but there was too much damage, too much blood. He died in 4 minutes, looked right at me the whole time like he was asking why I couldn't fix it. Then the field opened up. Machine guns from those stone farmhouses, mortars walking across the turnip field, and this sniper, patient, methodical, picking off anyone who moved. We'd walked into prepared German positions, every structure fortified, every approach covered, and Company EIA sitting in the open like targets at a rifle range. Within 30 minutes, we had casualties scattered across 200 yards of frozen ground. Sergeant Hawkins got hit trying to pull Kowalski's body back, took a round in the abdomen. Private Yates, our assistant bar gunner, shot through both legs. Corporal Dietz, attempting to flank left, hit a tripwire. Explosion tore open his thigh, femoral artery pumping red into the frost. And that sniper kept working, single shots, patient as death, waiting for someone to panic and run. Lieutenant Carver was screaming into the radio. The Rangers weren't advancing. They were being slaughtered, surrounded in cisterna, cut off, no relief possible. Our whole reason for being there had evaporated, and now we were just stuck in this ditch, taking fire from positions we couldn't see. I counted 11 men wounded, 11 boys scattered across that field in shell craters and ditches, bleeding out while we sat 40 yards away and listened to them scream. Carver looked at me and said, "Stay down, we'll get them after dark," which meant some of them, maybe most of them, would be dead by then. Abdominal wounds, severed arteries, sucking chest wounds. These things don't wait for nightfall. I could hear Sergeant Hawkins calling my name, just Doc, Doc, over and over, getting fainter. I made a choice. Don't know if it was the right one, don't know if there even was a right one, but I made it. Started crawling toward the nearest wounded man, Private Yates, maybe 80 yards forward into that field. Lieutenant Carver grabbed my ankle, said I was insane. Maybe I was. But Yates was 19 years old and screaming for his mother, and I had morphine and bandages and the simple, stupid belief that I could reach him. The crawl to Yates took 12 minutes, elbows and knees, body flat against frozen furrows, using every depression in the ground for cover. The sniper fired twice, both rounds so close I felt the pressure change, mud kicking up into my face. My shoulders were cramping, my knees bleeding through my trousers, and every time I looked up, I could see Yates thrashing in this shallow crater, both legs shattered below the knee. When I reached him, his eyes were rolling back, going into shock. Someone had tried to apply tourniquets, but did it wrong, cutting off all circulation. He'd have lost both legs in an hour. I fixed them, loosened just enough to keep tissue alive, then jammed a morphine syringe into his thigh and dragged him deeper into the crater. That's when I realized I couldn't drag anyone back. Too far, too exposed. I could stabilize them, and that was all. Patch them up and leave them and pray someone else could get them out. So I kept crawling. Pattern emerged over the next 3 hours. I'd watch the sniper's rhythm bolt-action rifle meant roughly 5 seconds between shots, and I'd time my movements to his reloads. Crawl during the cycle, freeze when I thought he was aiming, reached PFC Morrison with a sucking chest wound, sealed it with petroleum gauze from my aid bag, reached Corporal Evans with shrapnel in his face, both eyes gone, and I bandaged him and lied and said he'd be fine. Each crawl took 10 to 15 minutes, and the sniper was learning my patterns, adjusting, predicting routes. A bullet grazed my shoulder around 10:30, burned like someone pressed a hot iron to the skin, but I kept moving. The temperature was rising, mud getting softer, harder to stay low. I'd treated 6 men by 11 o'clock, and I was running low on supplies. Down to 4 morphine syrettes, maybe 3 bandages, hardly any sulfa powder left. And that's when I spotted Corporal Dietz behind this dead cherry tree, 150 yards forward, the deepest into no man's land anyone had fallen. I could see him, could see the blood pooling dark around his leg, could see him moving, conscious, trying to press his hands against the wound. Femoral artery meant minutes, not hours. If I didn't reach him soon, he'd bleed out behind that tree and nobody would even know he'd been alive this long. The crawl to Dietz was the worst. Halfway there, I found Private Sullivan face down in a shell crater, still warm but already gone. Took his dog tags and kept moving. The final 50 yards were completely exposed, no cover at all, just frozen mud and dead turnips. The sniper had a clear sight line. I started timing movements between his shots, counting in my head. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, crawling during reloads, freezing during aim. A round hit 6 inches from my head, and I swear I felt the air split. Another took off the heel of my left boot. But I reached that cherry tree, reached Dietz. His face was white, lips blue, legs soaked in blood. The femoral artery was severed clean, probably from shrapnel, and he'd been holding pressure for God knows how long, but his hands were giving out. I applied the tourniquet, used the last of my sulfa powder, and that's when he looked at me and whispered, "Clara." That was his daughter's name. 7 years old, lived in Michigan with her mother. He kept saying it, "Clara, Clara." And then he gave me his home address, made me repeat it back to him, said, "Tell Clara I tried." I promised, injected my last morphine syrette, and stayed with him. Crouched behind that cherry tree while German machine guns swept the field and mortars started dropping closer. We were pinned there, both of us. I'd crawled into the deepest part of the kill zone, and now I couldn't get out. Mortar rounds walking closer, Germans trying to finish the wounded before we could evacuate them. I covered Dietz's body with my own during the explosions, felt shrapnel punch into my aid bag and thought, well, this is where it ends. Behind a dead tree in an Italian turnip field, holding a dying man while the world tries to kill us both. Then around noon, I heard diesel engines. 2 Sherman tanks came rolling up, redirected from the failed Ranger relief operation. They engaged those farmhouses with 75mm guns, stone walls collapsing, sniper window disappearing in a cloud of dust and fire. Lieutenant Carver organized a squad rush during the suppression, and PFC Jackson and Corporal Mendez came sprinting across that field like their pants were on fire, grabbed Dietz and me, and dragged us back to friendly lines. 6 hours I'd spent crawling through that field. 12 men treated, 3 died waiting for me to reach them. By the time they pulled me back to the ditch, my hands had stopped shaking and I couldn't feel my legs, and all I could think about was the boys I hadn't gotten to, the ones who'd stopped screaming while I was busy with someone else. They evacuated Dietz to the field hospital, lost his leg, but lived, made it home to Clara. Private Yates kept both legs barely, walked his daughter down the aisle in 1952. P.F.C. Morrison with a chest wound died 2 days later. Pneumonia, nothing I could have done different. Sergeant Hawkins lasted 4 hours. I held his hand at the end. He didn't say anything profound, just asked if I'd gotten to the others. I lied and said yes. Final count for Company E that day: 8 killed in action, 19 wounded, 3 missing, and we were the lucky ones. The Rangers, 761 men, went into Cisterna that morning. 6 escaped, 6. The rest were killed or captured in what became the worst Ranger casualties of the entire war. All that blood, all that planning, and the Germans still held the town for 4 more months. We didn't take Cisterna until late May during Operation Buffalo. Lieutenant Carver submitted me for a Silver Star. I put it in a drawer and never looked at it again. Because medals are for heroes, and I wasn't a hero. I was just too stupid to stay down when smart men told me to. War doesn't make heroes. War makes corpses and survivors, and sometimes you can't tell which one you are until years later, when the nightmares finally settle into something you can live with. I wrote a letter to Clara Dietz, kept it simple, told her that her daddy was brave, that he talked about her at the end, that he loved her more than anything. Didn't tell her about the blood or the screaming or how her father begged me to promise he wouldn't die in that field. Some truths don't belong in letters to 7-year-olds. Company E rotated back into the Anzio perimeter in early February. I stayed on as medic through the spring stalemate, treated frostbite and trench foot and shell shock and shrapnel wounds. Never crawled across another field quite like that. Circumstances never repeated exactly. The boys started calling me Doc, got protective of me, like keeping the medic alive was the one thing they could control in a war where nothing else made sense. You want to know if it was worth it? If crawling 200 yards under sniper fire saved enough men to balance the equation? I can't answer that. I'm not God, and I wasn't a general. I was a kid from Philadelphia with a canvas bag and too many wounded boys screaming my name. But here's what I carried out of that turnip field. Every man I reached got a chance. Maybe they lived, maybe they didn't, but they didn't die alone in the mud wondering if anyone cared enough to come. That's not heroism. That's just what you do. When someone's calling your name and you've got bandages in your bag, you go. The arithmetic's simple, even if nothing else is. I kept those dog tags, the ones from men I couldn't save. Carried them through Sicily, France, all the way to Germany, not as punishment, as evidence. Evidence that they were there, that it mattered, that someone remembered Private Sullivan face down in the frost and Kowalski choking on his own jaw and all the others whose names got filed in folders and forgotten. War doesn't teach lessons. War just is. It breaks some men, hardens others, and leaves most of us somewhere in between, trying to make sense of things we did when sense wasn't available. I don't have wisdom about that frozen field. I just have the memory, the smell of mud and cordite, the sound of the sniper's rifle, the weight of knowing that every second I hesitated was a second someone bled. They gave me a Silver Star. I put it in a drawer and never looked at it again. Because medals are for heroes, and I wasn't a hero. I was just a medic who couldn't stand the sound of good men dying alone. That's the only truth I brought home from Cisterna.